So you mentioned a few times some of the previous downturns. You mentioned the mid 70s, and then you said the late 80s, early 2000s ish, late 90s, and
I'm happy to go through cycles with you. So,
yeah.
The first one I lived through as a teenager was 1973, 74. And that's when we all remember gas lines and those kinds of things. You may not, but I certainly do. And then in the late 70s, early 80s is when we had hyperinflation. And so, back then it was kind of crazy. I mean, you could literally get a CD that paid 18%. It was nuts a year. And interest rates were out of control. But the flip side was everything cost so much more the next year, you almost could not make a mistake in my business. No matter what you paid to build a building in year one and year two, it was worth more because the next guy to build a building had so much more cost. And so you almost couldn't lose money. Now, cash flow was an issue, but you almost couldn't lose your value. So that was pretty interesting. I mean, my first mortgage on my house was 12%, and I thought I died and gone to heaven. It was amazing. And then Reagan got elected. They changed some tax laws that really improved the economy. And then the RTC crisis came about in the late 80s, early 88, 89, only because people were so optimistic, they did a lot of stupid things. And it just inflated and blew up in their face, right? They just thought everything they touched would turn to gold, and guess what? It didn't turn to gold. And so we went through another little recession then. The 90s were all pretty good, early 90s. And as you go back into the later 90s and into 2000, we had the tech bubble issue. And then 2008, we had the Great Recession. And then, now we've got whatever we got. I don't even know what you call it. But, it's pretty regular cycles you're always going to have in our business.
Can you compare today to any other time frame?
Well, I think I said this in the article you picked up when you decided to call me. One of the things that's happened is we've had such a long period of low interest rates that this higher interest rates have caught a lot of people off guard. And so in many respects, it's really challenging to younger business people that haven't been through the cycles, and they weren't really prepared for it because they never knew to be prepared for it. And so I think what makes it different may be more psychological than real. I mean, to think that we're going to keep interest rates at 2 or 3% for the rest of your life just doesn't make any sense. There's no economic model that would show that would make sense. If we ended up with an interest rate environment that's in the mid fives, on average, a little plus or minus there, that would probably be closer to normal and people could adjust to it. I think there are probably people who would think this is as bad as a Great Recession because they weren't prepared for it, but it's not.
And by the sound of it, you don't think it'll get as bad either.
No, if you can come up with a plan to stay through it and live through the high interest rates and all the extra interest charges you're going to have, you will come out on the other end and it will get better and there'll be opportunity galore. I mean, there's always opportunity after a recession or after a cycle, always. And so the question is, how do you recognize it and how do you get prepared for it? And everybody's different. Everybody's got a little different market sector. But I think anybody who's got a business like mine should be looking for 6 months, a year, and 18 months down the road is really where they're going to get their opportunity. And how do I get myself ready for that?
As an outsider, because we're focused on acquisitions, not development, to me, it seems like developers are usually the first to fail or fall when there's bad times. And not all developers, but just like they're kind of the first domino, let's call it, to drop.
There's a reason for that. And there really is. I mean, if you think about what developers do, by their nature, by their definition, they've always got the most expensive thing on the leading edge. They've always spent the most money to advance the market. And so they've always out there taken the greatest risks. There's no question about it. And they're either going to be super successful or they're going to have a big problem. And you talk about acquisitions, developers need to learn how to do acquisition at the right time. So when I see a recovery coming, I've been a guy who does acquisitions after a recession because there's opportunity there, right? And so then you want to buy things right because something that was planned before didn't work. And I mean, that's the kind of thing I think you're doing or want to do. And it'll be easier to do as we go through a cycle.
Yeah, we're kind of positioning ourselves to be able to get aggressive with acquisitions and call it the next 6 to 12 months. The last year and a half, we didn't do a whole bunch just because nothing made sense to us, at least, and we wanted to focus on operations and kind of setting ourselves up.
Well, in the last year where you were in this paradigm where interest rates were too high to be able to afford the money, and the prices hadn't come down enough to offset it. As you go through the rest of the cycle, interest rates may or may not come down, but the pricing will change to offset it and make it make sense. So deals you looked at a year ago may make sense a few months from now.